At the beginning of my career, I was an idealist. I used to think you could solve the world's problems in funny ways. You can protest outside of a dirty power plant, or you could tie yourself to a tree if you didn't want to see that particular tree cut down. And then I also thought that air pollution, and I thought that water pollution and climate change later in life were merely environmental issues. I also thought I knew what it would take to change the world. And then I became a mother. Everything I thought I knew, everything I thought I knew was turned on its head. Fighting climate change, combating climate change, was no longer just an environmental issue. Combating climate change became an issue about my children and your children, my children who you can see here, Abe and Jesse, and my quest to make sure we build a world where they can be safe, and they could be healthy, and they could be assured a viable planet, whether they choose to live in Boston or in Botswana. Climate change is so much more than just an environmental issue. If there's one thing I leave you with here today, it is this. Climate change is our generation's greatest social, environmental, public health, national security, and economic crisis threat of our generation, of our future. It is here, it is real. Today I want to talk a little bit more about climate change and the economy. Some of you may think that's odd. Some may think, isn't climate change more about polar bears or melting ice caps than about capital markets? But we must be clear, if we don't change our capital markets, how we invest in clean energy, in an energy future, what future we will build, if we continue to invest in fossil fuels at the rate we're going, we will assuredly ruin the planet and ruin our children's future. Every generation has its challenges, no matter how far back you go. But let's look at just my grandparents, our grandparents, their challenge of rebuilding after World War II. That was a huge challenge given the colossal crisis and catastrophes brought upon them by that war. Or our parents, who fought every day for civil rights to be sure that everybody had the same rights that many of the privileged had, and certainly a battle in the United States. But our generation, unequivocally, our greatest challenge facing us right now is combating climate change with absolutely everything we have. That's our challenge, needs to be front and center. I suspect many of you in this room are parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles. And if there's one thing I know about being a parent, we don't like to disappoint our children. I certainly don't like to disappoint my children, particularly my daughter. She lets me know. But whether it's missing a birthday party or a soccer game or a piano recital, it's never a good thing. We don't want to look at our children after we disappoint them. So how do you think we'll feel? How do you think each and every one of us will feel when we have to look our children in the eye and say we have failed at our greatest challenge, our greatest obligation to you? We have ruined your planet, and we created more economic harm than this world has ever seen before. That's not a position any of us would like to be in. And hopefully, it won't be a position we're in. The subprime mortgage meltdown, the catastrophe brought upon our global economy by the subprime mortgage meltdown, will pale in comparison to what the global economic consequences of climate change are. Or let's think about it this way. You're at an airport with your family. You're waiting to board a plane, and as you about to get on that plane, the pilot leans in and says, there is a 98% chance, as scientists are also telling us about climate change, there is a 98% chance this plane is going down. Let me ask you something. How many of you in this room are getting on that plane with your families and your children? I'm not seeing a lot of hands, and of course, we are an intelligent group. We're not getting on that plane, but we need to think about the fact that we are on a plane, that plane called planet Earth, and it is in that colorful metaphor of the plane, in the picture right here, we're on a plane, otherwise known as our planet, that's moving forward with unchecked climate change coming at us, and coming at us with a vengeance. If 98% of the scientists are telling us that climate change is real, that climate change is now, that climate change is impacting our lives, it's time for us to stop and take stock. Now, many of us until recently somehow thought this was all hypothetical. The impacts weren't going to be felt for 5 years, maybe 10 years, 15 years, or even 30 years hence. And nobody felt any sense of urgency to act on a problem that gets worse every day we didn't act on it. But we know now the following. We know that 5 million people already die each year from causes related to climate change, be it hunger, be it drought, being disease from pollution. 5 million people already each day today. And we know that storms are more intense. We know that droughts are more frequent. We know that fires are happening more than we would like to see. And we know that cities, like my hometown of Boston, Massachusetts, right here, that cities on waterfronts are in jeopardy, and that jeopardy is growing. Think about Hurricane Sandy in the city of New York, where we all saw the kind of ravage and damage. And obviously, it is around the world. This is not a problem plaguing one area or another. Think about China. In Beijing, scientists are telling us, they are telling us now, that Beijing will look like and be similar to a nuclear winter due to unchecked pollution and damages from greenhouse gas emissions. Or in California, we are already seeing drought drying up thousands of acres of farmland, thousands of acres of our precious farmland, killing crops and killing animals, and at the same time forcing us to lay off tens of thousands of workers in our own state of California. Not a welcome change. And snow on our mountaintops, literally outside the buildings right here. Snow on our mountaintops are drying up. How does that feel for all of us who are great skiers and want to be out there on the mountains? Certainly not a good thing, and not a good thing for the people who work in the $646 billion outdoor industry in the United States alone. And then we've got to stop and think. We've got to stop and think about what these issues mean for the poorer populations and the developing world. Because I can tell you with certainty, the science is clear. They will be impacted disproportionately, and we will have to think about what that means. It means that we will see by the end of the century hundreds of millions of people being displaced from the homes they live in, creating havoc, causing violent conflict, and wiping trillions of dollars off of our economy. The problems are real. We have got to focus on the solutions. It is time to act. It is time to act sooner rather than later. I don't want to make this overly simplistic, of course. This is a complicated set of issues, and we all know that. But we can think about part of this as a simple math equation. The scientists tell us to maintain our standard of life, to maintain the way of life we've grown used to, we have to invest $1 trillion a year into clean energy and a new energy future by 2030, and $500 billion a year by 2020. Today, we're already investing about $250 billion in clean energy and new technology. Now, $1 trillion. $1 trillion sounds like an enormous amount. $1 trillion is an enormous amount. Think about it. Some of us don't know how many zeros in $1 trillion. It's kind of like trying to paint a picture of the universe in your mind's eye. Sometimes it could be done, and sometimes can't. But let's put it into the context of a global economy. In the global crisis of 2008, what did we see? We saw global countries put $16 trillion into bailing out corporations, banks, and other financial institutions to make sure we did not have a complete economic meltdown. Or think about this. Over the course of 3 years, you and I and the global population, we will spend $1 trillion on chocolate and wine alone. A lot of money, for sure. I'm not asking anyone in this room to give up their chocolate or to give up their wine. But in the context of our global economy, $1 trillion doesn't have to sound quite like that much. We need to face those risks, face the clean trillion, think about what it takes to get there, and look at what it takes to get there, and start thinking about innovation. It can be done. You know, the millennials, the generation, my children, those born in the late 1980s all the way through to the early 2000s, they're already starting to think about how to fix the problems their parents created and their grandparents created. And they're doing marvelous things. The innovation is unending. Billy Parrish, a young man in California, a 31-year-old, started a company called Mosaic. And at Mosaic, they're crowdsourcing. They are bringing hundreds and thousands of people into a circle so to allow them to invest $50, $100, or possibly a little bit more. Those people will get competitive returns, and they're investing in a clean energy future for their economy and for their communities. Billy has already made sure that $5 million is invested in his one small community. And there are other rays of hope through innovation, through exciting things happening all around the world. I could share hundreds, but I won't. Think about Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, Grameen Shakti and colleagues have put 30,000 to 40,000 new solar panels across the country every single month over the last number of years. The innovations are great. They are happening around the world in small ways, in medium ways, and large ways. It is that spark of innovation that we all must fire up and make sure we're seeing more of it and not less of it. The younger generation is on it. They're moving forward. But what are some of the things we should think about to get to that clean trillion? A clean trillion we must get to. Let's first think about changing our investment patterns, putting trillions of dollars into more fossil fuels that may never be burned. They may never be burned because of climate change. They may never be burned because of the economic competitiveness of renewable energy, and they may never be burned because of policy changes. But we need to take the trillions of dollars, or last year alone, the $674 billion that went into looking for new fossil fuels, which might create more problems, and just imagine moving some of that capital into a clean energy economy, an economy where there are opportunities today that are competitive and that are profitable. Moving that money is crucial. Secondly, our largest corporations and investment firms must be thinking about the changes they need to make, and they are. Hundreds of the largest companies around the world are reducing their carbon footprint, are investing more and more into powering their data centers and their manufacturing facilities and their communities with cleaner energy. Utility companies are doing the same. It's happening around the world with commitments happening every day. And investors are making pledges, 3%, 5% of their portfolios, into a clean energy and an innovation economy where they too will make money. The green bond movement has flourished. We're seeing more investments in green bonds this year than ever before, with massive new investments coming online. So in addition to moving out of fossil fuels and to making sure our largest companies and investors are seeing the successes of building a clean energy future, we need to be sure our policymakers are acting. Policy is a crucial part of that. In many parts of the world, we have not seen that kind of action, and we must. Climate pollution, carbon pollution, has a cost, has a massive cost to our society, and in many parts of the world, there is no price on carbon. When something's free, you get more of it. We need to challenge challenge our policymakers to set a level playing field, to make sure that we're all operating by the same terms, not just the progressive companies or the innovative companies, but everybody is living by the same standard. We must put a price on carbon. And we must challenge our world leaders who will come together in the short period of a year and a half in Paris, where world leaders from around this world will debate and try and come up with a global treaty to deal with climate change. It is up to us to make sure that they are successful, and successful they must be. Remember, a lot of this is about a math equation. We must invest $1 trillion a year by 2030, $500 billion by 2020, and today we're already past $250 billion. And the reality is, it is happening. As I said, companies around the world, from IKEA, your own European great company, has pledged to go carbon neutral by the year 2020. And to hear IKEA's Steve Howard tell it, they have already saved $48 million in just starting. Their employees are happy, their customers are happy, and they have only just begun. Unilever is following suit, just committed to 100% renewables by the year 2020. And state policies do make a difference. In California, the 8th largest economy, what we've seen is 50,000 new jobs spring up due to policies that support renewable energy. More people are working, more innovation is happening, more companies are coming online, and more tax revenue is going to the state. The state's economy is stronger because of good and smart policies. The reality here is, it's not yet easy to imagine that we're going to solve all the problems of climate change overnight. We're not. But it is our greatest challenge. And we must think about how to change our spending and what role each of us can play. Changing our spending habits, changing the world's spending habits isn't easy. We get very dug in. We know how to deal one way and not another. But we can get there. Think about this. If the Fortune 100 companies invested 0.1% of their profits, we would be halfway to a clean trillion. Solving climate change is not going to be easy. It's not going to happen overnight, but it must happen. It must happen with each and every one of us, with each and every one of us committed to what we do in our home, what we expect the companies we invest in, we buy from, what we expect of our policymakers. The clean trillion is our great challenge. I hope each and every one will join me in making that clean trillion a reality. When I think about my family, the thing that moves me most every morning when I get up, and no doubt you feel the same way about your families, we are global citizens. We've got an obligation. Please join me in making that clean trillion a reality. Thank you very much.